Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. This session is going to be about how to use web monetization to remote control the Raspberry Pi, just the very basics of it. And then the repo will be adding more features as we go. So I'm going to share my screen. All right. Okay, that worked. Yeah, so this is the website, and you're welcome to go to this website. So the website is pi.cheerbot.me. Maybe somebody could write that in the chat to make it a little bit easier. And then also the port is 5571, and then MozFest is the page. So all of this is necessary to actually go to this. But then when you go, so you can see the website is very simple. But when you go, then you down at the bottom here, you can type something like "Hello World," and then take a second, I think, to wake up. But that does. This right here should say hello world. Let's see, live demo. And I'm also doing this within my own LAN. So I think it's a little bit more straightforward when it's outside of my LAN. I tried to use it on Firefox, and actually it wasn't happy because I was within the same network. Okay, let me try something again. Okay.
I think I just saw my message pop up.
Oh, great. Yeah. Okay. So yours is working. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. Cool. I'm glad that's working. I don't know why my internal one isn't working. It was working this morning, but actually, yeah, maybe it timed out. I bet the socket timed out. So I'm going to reload it. Yeah. So this is the back end. So this is it within the Raspberry Pi, and I'm using Screen, GNU Screen, which is actually fairly important for the overall stack, because then I can just leave GNU Screen and exit out of the Raspberry Pi in this SSH, and the program is still running. The process is still happening. Okay, so I restarted it. Let's see if this works. And you see it says that I connected here. And this is where Velo connected. Try one more time. Well, I see there's another one that's hi Kyle. Now, one of the things I did, because it's really, really simple. Oh, here we go. Hello world. There we go. That finally popped up. Okay. So yeah, one of the things I did that's really simple is play hello from Amsterdam one more time. I'll bring it a little bit closer so you can see a little better. It's fairly small. But yeah, I didn't create a queue. So if a bunch of people are sending texts at the same moment, then the Python will, the script will be triggered at the same time. So it'll probably show like a bunch of different types of text at once. And yeah, it's kind of sunny this morning. That's shadow. Yeah, so high shadow. Yeah, and the emojis, I see there's emoji here. That'll take some writing Python script. So what's that going to be? Yeah, it's just going to be question marks because it doesn't know the emoji. So again, this is just the basics, but room for improvement. So I'll go over what the basics are. That's one nice thing about the basics is that they're so simple but easy to explain and good for education. And I'm going to plug this in. This is actually the same. So that little cube, it's kind of not that interesting. So this is a robot that I made for Denver with the Gitcoin's art director. And so it's a statue. He made it in virtual reality. And then he worked with his brother who's good at measurements and that kind of stuff to make it into something in the real world. We 3D printed it. Yeah, so that same screen that I've been showing is within this pod. So I'll turn it on while I chat, and it displays sprites, which are more exciting, I think, than the text. But it'd be fairly easy, is what I'm about to show you, to just call that sprite Python as opposed to text Python. So people can remote control images as well, and that's perhaps one of the ways of those emojis can be displayed. Just have sprite emojis connected with the text version of what this is. Okay, so let me turn that on. So they can run in the background. And then I'll just show a screen real quick. So this is screen. So see how it detaches from the remote. And then I can leave the Raspberry Pi still on. And then if I want to turn the screen back on, I just do this. So Screen's a fantastic program. And the Graph gave me a grant to publish just like a one-click download toolkit that provides Screen and a few other really useful features that I got from Balaji, he's a fairly famous thought leader in Web3. He had a course back in 2013, a massive online course through Stanford, that startup engineering, and so he shared that tool kit, and I'll be upgrading it. So I already upgraded, but I'll be upgrading. So it's really super simple, and I'll be publishing that here next year about thing too. So if you're interested in that, look out for it. It'll be I should have already done it, but it'll be in the next upcoming weeks. Okay, so here's the repo. Go to this site to look at it. Oops. Okay, so I'll start with the HTML. So the HTML is when we go here, that's we go here, that's what's being served. So when you go to this when you go to this pi.cheerbot.me, the JavaScript also, after the HTML, the JavaScript serves up the HTML. And that's what's continuing to run. So that's why we need to use that GNU screen, so that the JavaScript is constantly running to see if anyone sends a request. And if they do send a request to get the HTML, then they get the HTML. And then that makes a socket connection. That's what the HTML does. And then that socket connection is an ongoing pipe between the client and the server. And so when we send text, we're using that stream pipe back and forth. Okay, so here's the HTML. This right here is the web monetization interledger and coil W3C working together to make sending fiat money really simple. So just if hopefully you try this yourself, all you would do is put your own payment pointer here, and web monetization has quite a bit of documentation that makes it educational, that helps you understand how that works. But all you have to do is find your payment pointer and then put it right here. And this is some basic CSS. So that's what has the different shades of gray. So just style stuff. Then using socket.io, as I mentioned before, and jQuery as well. jQuery is a really simple library, so it's not a framework, but I like using it quite a bit as opposed to a framework, much less opinionated. And then this is the script that has to run on the client side. So this script basically just handles the socket relationship. I'm using a syntax that I developed along with a patent, but you don't need to worry about the patent, use the syntax. And the main thing the syntax does is it takes legal writing techniques and really focuses on separating the definitions from the rest of the document. So if we look here, these are the definitions, and then they're used throughout. Put them in this object here. And then whenever we interact, so for instance, document, as opposed to what would traditionally be just document.monetization, I think that's in web monetization's educational materials, so that's how it's presented. We go to the definition section, like the definition clause in the contract, and then ask for the document. And that's how we access monetization. Other interesting things about this is, this is how this part right here is when you hit enter, that's what's sent to the server. So you as a client, when you go to this website and post hello, that's activated. And then in the JavaScript, then there's a response, and the HTML grabs a response with this, and then it modifies the HTML. There's that hi that just popped up there, and then it modifies the HTML with this. So kind of webhooks, or that's one of the terms used for this stuff. Okay. Yeah, so right here's the HTML that it modifies. It goes into this, and then it just adds the count, so it adds to the next one below. And so that's how it goes below. So we can actually inspect. And yeah, see right here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's adding to that. And this thing and this thing right here is in body. Right there. So here's this script I just shared. Right. And so when we go here, that's what's being dynamically updated through this script, the static HTML here. Okay, so that's quite a bit about our HTML. Then let's go to, this is just a favicon. Does it show up here? Yeah, there's a favicon. So that's that little image right there. And that's the art. It was the Solar Punk Gallery. So our group in Web3, mostly Gitcoin, but a larger group, we're trying to create a whole new kind of punk, or the punk already exists, but we're trying to support it, and it's solar punk. So it's trees and clean oxygen, all that good stuff. Oh yeah, let's go to JavaScript. So in the JavaScript, same thing, that syntax I said. So go down to the bottom. So in like a contract, the document section would be at the top, but because of the flow, I decided that it's better if the document section's at the bottom for scripts. And so this defines, see there's the port there. So if we want to change that port, so it's different than this one. All we'd have to do is modify that there. And then these are the different functions that are called. So you see here, it's accessing that document when the function. And so then it accesses this function. Same thing, it's fractal though. So this function is within that parent document. It's like, think about a nested doll. So this is one doll within that parent doll. And this is the definition within this like subcontract, child contract of this parent contract. And so these are the definitions that are used here. These null definitions for that pattern I described, it's the main thing what that does, or one of the main things it does, is it's very fastidious about definitions. So it doesn't have this looseness of null, where then I just do an association with null. It manages that. So that helps make sure there's no human error. But in this case, it's very simple. And so we just rely on making sure people did it right. And so this IO, when the server is started up, then this is the object that holds the server. So if we need to call it again, like we do here, so when a connection happens, we want to have something happen, we can access it through this. So think of this as the child contract, and then this is when the server is called. This is where the child contract holds the server. And then as we can see here, it asks for this connection, or calls this connection function whenever a client accesses the website. And so this is connection. So if we go to this right here, we move up. It says shaking hands along port. So when the server starts up, this thing, that's where that function occurs, is the console log. It says it right there. And then when people disconnect, it also notifies us here. And then when someone sends a message, so when we do one of these things, this is the action that just says in here, right? So when we see someone from Amsterdam said hello, that's this part right here. My handshake headers. Okay, that's not as interesting as when the actual engagement occurs. That's here. So
can I ask
yeah,
you?
sorry, yeah.
So can you please go over the connection with the coil or like interledger? Because so is it the part where it says shaking hands? Is this when the connection happens with coil?
Actually, so this is a very simple version of it. I don't use a receipt system, and in the receipt system, then I would have to do some logic in the JavaScript. But because this is a very simple system, it only occurs on the client side. So my JavaScript assumes the client is being honest, and when they say web monetization occurred, that it actually did occur. So the only part that is engaged with Coil is right here in the header information. So this is my pointer, and you can see I've got the receipt thing set up, but I just haven't finished it up on the server side. I ran out of time to figure it out. Yeah, so it can be spoofed though, because the only thing the person has to do is, well, maybe I shouldn't say how you can spoof it, but it's fairly simple. So yeah, so that's all you need to do is you just need to, and then in this document, right, go here and we go to index. So all you'd have to do is change this to your own payment pointer.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I know I'm going into detail because we have this conversation, but I'm almost done this documentation. It'll just say how you can just quickly, it already explains, most of this is how you got stuff you have to learn for Raspberry Pi anyway. And so then all you have to do really is drag and drop this folder into your Raspberry Pi. And then when you run the program, I'll exile the program. So you can see here it says Cheerbot. So we're in that folder, this Cheerbot folder here. All you have to do is hit the JavaScript. This means to run it when it's a dot in front of it, just to run it. So it's an executable file, like a .exe in Windows if we're used to that operating system. This is a Linux base. You hit enter, and that's it. So it's ready to go. Yeah.
Thank you.
So then we can see all the different clients have now reconnected to the server. So the two things you have to do really are just change that payment pointer in that HTML and then run this app. The difficulty, and maybe we can get into it, but the difficulty really is when you're hosting by yourself at your own house, you have to go into your own router and do a port forward. And that's different for each router. So what you want to do is you'll want whatever your company is. So like it's AT&T, you'll want to ask, how do I do a port forwarding? And they'll have documentation that explains how to do the port forwarding. And hopefully I'll write some documentation as well to help with that a bit. It's a bit difficult though, because each router does it differently. It's not standardized. And one of the things I'm hoping for in the long run with Web3, what I'm doing in Web3 is that I can help try to get that standardized in the future, but that's years off. I do think it's limiting the tech space fairly severely, having homes as clients. Anyways, that's my soapbox. But yeah, so that's where it is a bit rough.
Kyle, can I ask you a quick question on the Web3 space? So I want to experiment with and I've kind of just very briefly started to experiment in that space with raising money for a documentary series. But I mean, partially because, I am conscious of the environment, but also because, one of the particular documentary series is nature-based. Do you know which of the blockchains is better for environmentally?
Oh, so that's interesting. So I think that this is Web3 as well. So it depends on your definition. To me,
I agree.
Web3,
I agree. This is Web3 as well. I mean, I mean, it also depends on how it's done, right? But I noticed that Cheerbot's on the blockchain. You were talking about that with Cheerbot. So
So for me, just real quick, my definition of Web3 is that that's what I was saying about how it's hard for you have to do this port forwarding and each router is different. To me, it's about people actually being able to own assets just like large corporations do in Web2. So it's much more about kind of getting out of a feudalist kind of thing. Heavily. And the environment thing is difficult as well. I definitely, big server farms is a major issue. So one of the reasons why I want Raspberry Pi is I want to, especially with water consumption, they're horrendous with water consumption. And so I feel if we have these devices that are actually physically distributed, then we won't have to do so much cooling off of centralized farms. And so and that's my whole point about solar pump as well. So the AI also, having people actually write script that's very succinct is much more efficient than having statistical methods. If we think about, we knew how the solar system was moving way back in the day, but Newton, said this really simple formula that was able to do all the math much clearer. Kepler also, we had all these reductions that made it more efficient. And so AI is the least efficient. So in general, we should figure out how to do things much less energy intensive, but that's a problem writ large. For the blockchain, part of the issue is, so there's this cathedral, the bazaar concept that
Okay.
is at the core of this. So if it's a bazaar, that means that anyone in the world can enter and do commerce. That means there's going to be a lot of sketchy behavior in a variety of ways, right?
Yeah.
So when people rug pull and steal NFTs and all that kind of stuff, one of the reasons is because Ethereum, which is what I'm working on, it's that bazaar, right? So everyone is included, but that means everyone is included. One of the issues with it is then proof of work has to happen, and that's for trust layer. And so it has to be the highest energy maintaining trust because everyone is around. So hopefully Ethereum 2, now that the ecosystem is built up enough and it's proof of stake, basically, so enough people have invested sufficiently in it that we can then use reputation. That is helping quite a bit. So just generally speaking, like I think Cardano is more efficient, but just sort of see, is it more like a cathedral? Cardano is more like a cathedral, then it's probably gonna be lower energy. If it's more like a bazaar, if it's young, then it's gonna be higher energy, and hopefully as it gets older, people within the bazaar have a reputation and it will get more efficient. If that makes sense. So we're philosophically kind of stepping back. Like why is it the high energy happening?
It sounds like a deeper conversation on a different day when you're not trying to introduce your Raspberry Pi. Sorry about that.
No worries. Feel it, yeah.
Hey, I'm now wondering, we started talking about blockchain and Ethereum, but does that have a relationship with this project and the repo you're showing now? I mean, besides conceptually, there's no Ethereum involved in what you've just shown, right?
No, there's not. No.
Okay.
And again, I think web monetization is Web3.
Sure.
I would
so my follow-up. Okay, so that was just checking if I still understand correctly. And then so the web monetization part. Where does it come in here? Because as Jessica was also just asking, and you gave your answer, you said you showed that line, that meta tag in the HTML. So is web monetization functionally being used in any of the functionality here, or is it just that you are showing in this repo, in this project, an interface that happens to be web monetized, and that you can send stuff to this Raspberry Pi screen, or is the web monetization functionality functional in any other way in this project?
Well, I mean, that's the way. I mean, I feel like that's a really important functionality. But yeah, basically, if someone goes to this right here, and they don't have the web monetization thing working, they can't remote control this Raspberry Pi. And so that's why tips, I think, are also quite exciting, because right now, it'll all have a few pennies from our interaction here. But if with tips, then that certain remote controls, people will want to have large amounts of money for other people to be able to do the remote controlling.
Right. So you're using web monetization here as an access control almost.
Exactly.
To control when you're on board, when you have it enabled, then you can play and you can send messages, and otherwise you don't.
That's totally correct. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not trying it. So I did not realize that, but like, and I have Coil enabled, and I was doing this in Firefox, but I'm now going to open this interface in Chrome and trying it out, and then it shouldn't work, is what you're saying. Because I don't have the extension on Chrome.
Yeah, because this if statement right here, this if statement, you'll fail the if statement.
I see. Okay, gotcha.
And you should get this message, actually. You should get this message. If it's working but not working, right? Yeah, you should get that message.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's a great clarification. Thank you. I'm
getting that message. I'm getting that message. I'm getting awesome. Install Coil for remote control. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. And so right now that's fairly easy to spoof, right? And that's cool. But
yeah, because I could write that into the document from the console probably.
Yeah, but with this receipts, that's the way that's fixed, right? So what monetization knows, that's an easy spoof. That's a problem writ large. And so, but that means I'll have to add some extra logic on the JavaScript side. The stuff that was presented in the documentation used Express JS, and I wanted to keep it only Node.js, and I just couldn't really figure out the post. And you know, I only had 3 hours, so for later. I saw there was another hand raised. I couldn't catch the name though, and I'm screen sharing. But please ask your question.
Hi, Kyle. Thank you so much for the this is so interesting. I just, because I'm a newbie, really, I just wondered if I've got this right. Like, so the coil is allowing the Raspberry Pi, it's enabling like a key to your unlock, so you can communicate with the Raspberry Pi. But I'm just wondering what do you expect people to maybe do with that functionality? Did you have some sort of ideas or did you? I'm not sure if you spoke about it earlier. I'm sorry, I arrived late. But I was just wondering what you think might happen.
Yeah, well, why I'm excited about Raspberry Pi is it has GPIO pins, and so those are general purpose pins, right? So I've got this LED hat that Pomeroni makes that just goes within those pins, and Pomeroni makes a lot of different hats, and so does Adafruit and a few other companies. So oh, I see someone sending a message. Yeah, and I'm sorry that the sun is messing with this and making it hard to see, but yeah, anyway, such is life. Yeah, so they're so Pomeroni has one where it's a soil moisture monitor, and they use that one for growing plants. So I could see a possibility where you can do the monetization to hydrate soil, for instance. So if we're concerned about the environment, I mean, that one's a little bit less easy to do. But if you look at the different hats that are available, you can kind of think out of the box. Well, what do I want to have it so that someone can remotely control available within this? So I think there are even actual remote control cars and like that people have these DIY systems. So that's something to check out as well. Adafruit's really good with all their DIY manuals, so you can basically go anything that, if it's Raspberry Pi, not only is it GPIO, but it's also Wi-Fi connected. And these are Raspberry Pi zeros, so this is 0.2, and it's fairly fast at this point, and it's only $15. But a 0.1 is $10. So we're talking a very little amount of money, Wi-Fi connected with GPIO pins. So you just sort of think, oh, if it's Wi-Fi, then whatever I'm doing, or whatever this DIY product is, if I can Wi-Fi connect it and I can remote control it, what are the possibilities? And I can web monetize that remote control. So yeah, so really it's I'm just doing this LED display in part because we did have a chat before about Ethereum and there's this NFT thing. So these sprites I have, that's a way to I figure out to monetize. But yeah, there are definitely quite a few ways. And if you think about how the internet has monetized, big areas the internet has monetized by having remote access to things, then you can kind of get some ideas.
It reminds me, I don't know if you're aware of the collective intelligence experiment they did, which was part of where they got the game Pong to be operated by people who had no you know the experiment I'm talking about, yeah? It just reminds me. Oh, okay. Yeah. Basically, they put a load of people in a room with flip sticks. They didn't tell them what to do, and if you flipped them one way, it made the Pongs move, and then they just allowed them. They had to collectively though work without being able to communicate with each other in the dark, and they had to figure it out. Anyway, short story is that people found ways to sort of collectively make the game of Pong work, and it was sort of precursor to how the internet could work. Potentially, it was back in the 70s or where. But I just wondered, is there a way that this could, like, let's say a lot of people were using their web, like if it wasn't just one individual, but there was multiple people directing, let's say, their browsers towards something like this. whether that could have a cumulative effect or something, or whether do you see what I mean? Whether it can potentially bring about coordination between people to achieve something. That's just a very random question, but I guess you might see where I'm getting at. It's rather than one person unlocking a key, is it possible for many people to unlock?
Yeah, definitely. Like, so for instance, one thing that would just be really simple logic is that you'd have to have 5 or 6 people logged in at the same time with their web monetized payment pointers connected before anything would happen. You could just do that, right? So you could only send texts if you had at least 6 people that are logged on to your website, right? So right now, I don't have that limitation, but really just a matter of the JavaScript logic. So let me go on a little bit into the JavaScript logic, and so maybe that can give you some ideas. So really, on the client side, all it's saying is if someone has web monetization activated, then they can engage with Socket.io. So Socket.io is like if you Google Docs in your real-time updating, it's I don't know if they use Socket.io, but it's a similar system. So it's an ongoing pipe between the server and the client. So if you just send one piece of text, then the server knows it. Well, in this case, you have to hit send, but in any case, pretty much. You can pretty easily actually use Socket.io to not even have to hit the send button. So that's a limitation I imposed there. And so that's all it is. It just says, if you have a monetization, then you can access the socket, which is why it's easy to spoof, because you could just change this and just access the socket, right? You just get rid of the if, because you're the client side, so it's your logic. I know these days we hide our logic, but that's me on my soapbox again. So yeah, so all you have to do is this. And then on the server side, so when you're asking a question, that's where so if we look here, this is what the server side aspect is, right? And so let's see, what I have is, so message. Yeah, so in the chat, so I do actually do a little bit of vetting, right? So like if somebody doesn't, on the server side, so if somebody doesn't have MozFest here at the end, then they don't have access, right? So they do actually connect to my server, but then my server asks, do you have MozFest? One URL here, MozFest right here. See this? See, it says MozFest. So you could change this. So if you have a room that you only want certain people to access with a secret code, this is a really easy way to do that. Because then you just like in your particular event, you just change this around. So MozFest 2022, right? If next, or 2023, next year, if we don't want people from this session to whatever, right? We could do that. And then they have to know this secret phrase to get it, right? So so that is some logic I do to limit access. So unlock again on top of the monetization unlocking. And then in here, so as I get the data, I collect it in this string. And then when everything finishes up, where is it? Sorry, I'm doing this on the fly. Oh, pardon me. This part just sends the HTML. That's all this part does. So when the HTML is sent, so I won't send the HTML at all if somebody doesn't have this phrase. So you won't even be able to call up this website. That's what that logic does. Okay, so to answer your question, it's not in this chat section. It's in this connection section. So connection is the Socket.io thing. Sorry about the confusion. Yeah, right here. So when somebody sends a message, and so if we look here, right there, see it says message. So if I changed, oh, actually, is it that part? Where's the if statement? Okay, it's this one. I use message for both the client and the server. But if I change this to something, this part right here, this is just how Socket.io works. This message part has to connect with this message. So I could change it to text or notice or whatever else I want. And that's how Node.js operates. So Socket.io has made it so you can do your own thing. But like, so for instance, disconnect, that's opinionated. You have to use the word disconnect. But Socket.io, you can do whatever. So in this case, I did message. So what happens is the client gets through because I have web monetization. So that means I'm getting paid, right? And then this message thing, they send the message thing. And then on the server side, I've got it so that if they send message, I'll actually respond, right? So server, if I had something other than message, I also wouldn't respond. So both those things have to line up. And then when I respond, then I activate this function within my logic, and that's this function right here. So I said earlier, I don't know if you caught it, but I'm using a contract, like loop contract structure, so that all of my definitions are contained within a particular object. So this object is like the definition section of contract, and so this is message. So now we're in message here, and so this is the logic you play around with, right? So when I was trying to get the receipt thing going, I would have to engage kind of here to have that logic to so make sure someone isn't spoofing. But you saying you want multiple people around, you would do something more complex in here. So what I have is like the bare bones simple here. So all it does is the message is sent, and then what's really key, the reason why it's able to trigger the Raspberry Pi, the thing that connects it to the hardware. So it's not just a website. So like up to this point, really, this is all the same as any other web demonstration. So this is where it actually changes to Raspberry Pi hardware specific GPIO pins, real world stuff. Is it calls this Python script, and this Python script is we can pull it up later, but that Python script is what engages with the actual machinery. So here in JavaScript, I just trigger that Python script. And so you can trigger all kinds of Python script, what have you, but this is basically what you have to do for your question is you want to play with the logic at this stage to not just have like the super simple logic that goes, something comes in, trigger this Python script. That's all I've got, right? But you don't want to say, okay, multiple things come in, or something that I should do actually. So if people are sending a bunch of text for like this basic application, people are sending a bunch of text, then I don't want to call the Python a bunch because it hasn't completed itself yet, right? And it'll just, the hardware will be overloaded because it'll get a bunch of calls. So the text, basically what happens, the text will overlap another text, right? Because the hardware is just dumb. So what I want to do is pretty simple. We just set up an array, and that's a queue. And so when the Python finishes, then do the next in the queue. Yeah, so I've already set up queues in other prototypes, but that's just a straightforward example of where you want to do extra logic. So especially if a bunch of people are engaged at once, right? Like as you're thinking, then you don't want to have that noise. So you do want to queue people up. Not as cool as some collaborative thing that you're contemplating, but still necessary. So there's the Python. Jessica, do you want to?
Yeah, perfect. I mean, that's a perfect moment to ask you this because I was thinking of, so up to the point where the script could be used like anywhere, I was thinking of integrating this into P5. Like it's a creative coding using JavaScript too. And then the hardware connection part. So I have the microbit BBC. I know it's like a super like it's an early learning tool. So I have it. I had it a long time ago. So I was thinking of experimenting with it. It doesn't use PyCode, but I think it does actually. I can integrate PyCode in it. So I'm gonna try to use it instead of Raspberry Pi. And so eventually I want to integrate, because I'm working on a sketch that has like some kind of an input and that gets some kind of an output. And I was looking to integrate this kind of physical output like reaction. So I'm gonna try this out, like maybe over this weekend, and then maybe circle back to you if I have any questions or if it ends up working. It's just that like the integration of the Python code, is there any other alternative? Because like I don't work with Raspberry. I mean, I've worked with Raspberry Pi, but I prefer like using something else because it's really gonna be like a very simple physical output.
Yeah. So one thing you'll need to connect web monetization is you'll need your hardware will have to be Wi-Fi connected or Ethernet connected. Yeah, so it has to do that so it can actually communicate with the internet. And then otherwise, the reason why I use Raspberry Pi is, and not just Raspberry Pi, but Pi Moroni, is they, the Python, so they've got this right here, this library they make that actually does the machine language engagement, and so the Python is really, really simple because this organization that made the circuit board, the LED circuit board, they actually put an ARM chip in it. So I'm going to share another one of these to show. Yeah, so here's the back end of these LED, right? And so there's the ARM chip right there. And the circuit boards, they've got really beautiful back ends. So this is the front of it, yeah. And then the GPIO pin I was talking about, that's this right here. So all you have to do, right, is plug it in. And then also they did the software. So then also on the Python side, all you have to do is call up this library and then just use this define word. And then, so for instance, this particular one, then I can just rotate the text. So when I first started this, actually rotation was off. So I had to figure out that I had to do 90 degrees. So the text was, horizontal appropriate. So that's where you'll, with your solution, that's the big difference really. So I chose Raspberry Pi because they have educational materials, getting things ready to go with this SD. They have really great software that it's easy to flash the SD. And then, so just ease of use. It took me quite a bit of research to figure out what's just as simple as possible that can engage with this stuff that is actually very complex, right, under the hood. So, because I'm already dealing with a certain level of complexity hosting the website, right? So the fact that all I have to do is write Unicorn HD, and I know that it's got an ARM chip that's working and the library is well written, that makes that process immediate, whereas I could spend weeks on it otherwise. And so that's just what I would say with what you're up to is just be aware that if you have to do it manually, then you'll have to do it manually, basically. But that also gives you, usually with manual, then you have more flexibility. So that's sort of the general trade-off, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Yeah, and in fact, Adafruit, they've got great stuff, but it's just that extra level of complexity with their DIY. So they've got LED displays that are beautiful, but I tend to shy away because I'm trying to do it as educational as possible. So any little extra complexity, even if it's kind of cool looking at the end, my personal project, I go into the direction of which just easy because I'm dealing with complexity a whole other way. Philo, yeah.
Yeah, actually, we're almost at the end of the session, but I saw that Santiago has a question in the chat. I don't know if you see questions in the chat, so I just wanted to point that out.
Oh, yeah. Do you mind reading out loud for us?
Santiago, do you want to ask your question out loud?
Oh, okay, that works too.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was trying to connect using Firefox 99 in Ubuntu. I received the message to install the extension of code. I have already installed it, but can't connect to the shellcode. I don't know if it has the DNS problem or what happened, but I cannot connect.
So are you typing all of this right here? So pi.cheerbot, and also it's CS is not secure. So HTTP, not HTTPS is another one. So it has to be all of this, and HTTPS is another layer of complexity, so which is important, but for this demonstration, not necessary. So in the least, you should be able to get up to HTML. So in the least, you should be able to go to this page. If you can't go to this page, then it doesn't really matter the web monetization thing, because you're not even engaging with this with my server at all.
Santiago, I think you were getting the page, right?
Yeah, I'm trying, but it doesn't work. I don't know. But I have the GitHub account. I follow you guys.
Okay, yeah. And if you don't have coil set up, right, as Philo tested when he sent send and he didn't have the web monetization thing working, then he's still got a message. He's still got an engagement, and it said this install coil. So at the very least, I'll see if this is still running. So yeah, I don't really know, but we're at time as well. Yeah, please follow me on GitHub, and I'll be making this stuff more simple, and I seem to be getting grants and all that, so I should have more runway, and I've got a few people that just joined on the team. So another exciting thing we'll be doing is we'll be publishing free CAD designs. So if you want to make these chassis and so spice up your LEDs, then please visit us, because those will also be public goods, free stuff that you can DIY yourself if you want.
Yay, Philo said he just tipped you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for a great session.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you, Kyle.
Awesome.
Yay,
And Jessica,
Thank
did
you.
you want to share something about your upcoming session? Because it might be interesting for this audience.
Yeah, sure. We have an upcoming session today. I'm co-facilitating it with Vinyl from Interledger, and it's about Web3 and decentralized apps. So it's mostly a discussion about sharing the best practices and what kind of resources to use, which ones are reliable, and all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of an open conversation. Please join us and share anything you have to say about that. It's going to be a really good educational resource for our community. So yeah, and thank you again, Kyle.
Thanks. I'm going to stop recording now.
Thanks all. See you later.
See you later. Thanks so much.
Thank you.